There you go.
Okay, thanks. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to City of Half Moon Bay Mobility Subcommittee meeting here on Thursday, December 16th, 2021. And we will start with, I guess we do a roll call, right? Just for our subcommittee. Well, I will, just in case. So
I'll do it for you.
Great.
Councilmember Penrose.
Here.
Mayor Brownstone.
Here.
We have 2 members present, 2 members on the committee. We have a quorum.
As good as it's going to get. Yes. All right, great. So we can continue. And tonight, for those from the public who are observing or participating, we will be discussing 2 topics. We'll have presentations. The first one will be on the Poplar Street Calming Project update. The second will be on the Main Street Bridge update. We will take those presentations one at a time. And then after each presentation, the way this works, I and Councilmember Penrose might ask a couple of quick clarifying questions, and then we'll open it up for public comment. And then after public comment, any particular things that staff might be able to address, that's fine. And then Councilmember Penrose and I will have a discussion. Councilmember Penrose.
Yes. Was I to give my special report now or at the end of the meeting?
Do you know,
I have a
John?
on commute.org.
Oh, okay.
I was going to suggest that at the end, but you know what? It's perfectly.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah, do it now.
Fine.
Yeah.
Why don't you do it now if
that sounds great.
If the chair is fine with that. So
no, that's perfect. Thanks for. I love to hear.
We're fresher right now.
Great. Okay, so I'm, as you know, I'm on the board of commute.org. And about 6 months ago, at one of our meetings, there was a discussion about changing the way they did their operations and shifting and the number of shuttle buses being used. And I made the point, along with our board member from Pacifica, that the coast is often forgotten when we talk about shuttles and we talk about extra transportation and public transportation in particular, and that they needed to pay attention to the fact that there are difficulties, there are issues on Highway 101, which are immense, are contributed to by people on the coast. Our commuters go over there, our parents with children go over there. At any rate, the upshot of it was that they took me seriously and decided that they would do a survey of the coast and the population of the coast to see what kind of commuting we did and how many people were commuting and for what reasons and where were they going. So this survey is almost completed. We're doing final revisions to it, but it will be publicized within the next couple of weeks. We're hoping early January. And we should, at that point, have some idea of how many people are dropping off children at private schools, how many people are going to college over the hill, how many people are just commuting back and forth. So it's a good thing for the coast. I'm very excited about it and very pleased that we've got it going. And I will certainly give another update to council once we get the results.
Great. All right, thank you for that update and look forward to seeing the results of that survey, which may then hopefully at some later date get some different kind of resourcing out here for perhaps having some shuttles over the coast, over the hill. I'm sure people would love some park and ride type opportunities. I know during COVID, it's hard to even find drivers, right, for some of the buses. So until some of this stuff settles out, we don't know, but it'll be great for us to be prepared to say, here's our current usage and see if we might be able to get some more resources. Thank you, Councilmember Penrose, for that update. Okay.
Public forum, I think, Chair, would be
Do we have a public forum for
Well,
anything at a
we should
subcommittee
make
meeting?
it available, even if it isn't really there, because we're obligated to. But I'll tell you this, there's nobody from the public in the audience wishing to speak. So it'll be easy.
Oh yeah, look at that. Okay, I will now open up public forum for anything that is not covered under this agenda. So anything not having to do with
For the
Poplar Street
record,
Calming
Chair,
Project.
for the
or
record, Chair, there are no members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay, no one's raising their hand. I will now close our public forum. Thank you, John, for that procedural reminders. I appreciate that. Okay, so now we will start off with a presentation, an update on the Poplar Street Calming Project.
So Moz is going to be taking the brunt of this, but I want to do a quick kickoff to this. And thank you for letting us come, and thank you for taking time. I know it's a difficult time of year with all the activities going on and family and draws for everything. So we really appreciate the two of you making time tonight to sit down with us. I think these will be very informative and helpful. And I want to first say we're not asking for any recommendations to, even direction tonight, but we are interested in your comments, thoughts, and kind of how we move forward. And certainly what our ask is, like, with virtually all subcommittees, is that you help us a little bit in the process of bringing your other council members up to speed at the time of the meeting when we come back for actual actions and or updates and reports. It's always helpful when you have a little bit more insight to some of this stuff, and that's why this is a great process. So I want to again reiterate for you, we're not asking for no direction, no specific actions, and this is really informational, but I think it'll be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. John,
yep.
Can I ask you one quick favor just ahead of time? Since we may be bringing back some of this knowledge to one of our next meetings, would you mind sending me and Council Member Penrose both the PowerPoint presentations in this case, because it'll help us.
Absolutely.
We want to refresh our memory and be fresh, because the maybe won't come up for another 2 meetings. And we're into holidays.
And what I'll suggest.
And also we're into February. We're trying to, remember everything without having to rewatch the session. So that'd be great.
What I'll suggest is that we'll put these PowerPoints on the website as well. So everybody that counts, the rest of the council should have access to this. The community, this is a public meeting. This is a public deal. So we'll do that, but we'll send you each individually these, but we'll also post them so everybody can look at them and deal with it and link to them.
That's great. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So Poplar Street is one that is been a challenge since the very, very beginning. In some ways, it's it's hard to explain sometimes what's going on, what the issues are, where we are with this deal. But just as a quick reminder, the council did authorize staff to proceed with a grant application, and Moz will talk about this in more details. Several years ago, through the One Bay Area Grant Program. Basically, it's state funds. It's really federal funds routed through the state, but it doesn't really matter. It's whatever. It's not our funds. And we received a grant for $1.2 million. That grant was based on a complete streets concept, and that basically includes streets, bicycle, pedestrian safety, pedestrian access, and stormwater, basically kind of the major components to that. So I'll make it easy and say we can't just pick one of those components and move forward with the project. So our challenge has been to basically put all of those things together. And part of this was facilitated by concerns from our community of neighbors in the Alsace-Lorraine area who were concerned about access of their kids to the schools, access to Poplar. We also had concerns from the senior community and basically having to walk in the street to go down Poplar. We have some seniors wearing helmets because they're walking down the street and they're very concerned. And those are kind of the issues that we've been trying to deal with. And we have a non-compliant from an ADA, from an Americans with Disabilities Act issue of a conveyance path of travel from basically Main Street to the beach and back. So those are all sort of in a nutshell what we were, looking at doing and working through with this, while trying to preserve the community character, the context sensitive components to the large trees, how people feel in that neighborhood and all those things. So what I can tell you before Moz gets going is that is a lot of effort to try to do all of those things and to get to to folks, happy. What I can say is that I think we got to a point where people were not horribly unhappy. They were all willing to kind of move forward with it for the masses. And I'll stop it there. I think we reached, and I think there are still some improvements, and Moz will talk a little bit about a few of those revisions and things that we are still looking at and tweaking around with this design. So Moz, take it over.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Penrose, and everyone watching now and possibly later. Moz Virginia, City Engineer with Half Moon Bay. I just want to confirm, you guys are seeing the clean PowerPoint, correct, on the screen share? Perfect.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you for that introduction, John. Let's take it from there. This project has been anticipated in multiple city adopted plans and capital improvement programs over the last few years. The project is identified as an implementing action from the 2013 circulation element for supporting bicycle and pedestrian travel along routes that connect the coastal trail with the Naomi Patridge Trail and Main Street. The 2019 Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan identifies Poplar Street as a major connector street with significant sidewalk gaps and makes recommendations for Class 3 bicycle improvements, high visibility crosswalks, and pedestrian pathway connectivity. And the recently updated land use plan further recognizes the need for this project to improve coastal access while being context sensitive to the neighborhood character. Some project background. So as John mentioned, there is a resolution of support from the City Council back in 2017 for the grant application that was submitted for the OBAG 2 grant, the One Bay Area 2 grant. There are some concerns with the timing of that. Obviously, 2017 it's been a while since those funds came through. They're actually on the process of distributing OBAG 3 grant funding, and so we are at the tail end of the grant program for the OBAG 2. So anyways, going back a little bit from there, we've been doing quite a bit of community outreach since that time. We had our first major community workshop in September of 2018, which we followed up with BPAC meetings and updates in November of that year. I want to highlight that we did attend the Senior Transportation Fair back in January of 2019. It was a wonderful event, and we were able to highlight and showcase our thoughts in our project schedule at that time with the seniors, and we received quite a bit of positive feedback from those that were in attendance. We had other meetings as well, National Night Out in August of that year, and we actually did a pretty robust community survey process for this project. We had online surveys that were filled out. It was actually very well, we got a good number of responses. We had 182 survey responses that came in through that October, November of 2019 time period. And a lot of the folks that got that survey through were the ones that were on the sign up for the project, as well as a lot of the folks that came to that original community meeting where we actually got a good list of the stakeholders from that group. All of the residents were invited, as well as general notification to the overall community. So it was great to get that number of 182 survey responses from 250 people that attended. That's a wonderful turnout and response. I also just wanted to mention that you can see at the so after those surveys, we had a community meeting that December. And then the next meeting after that was the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee project update in November of this year. And I don't want to belabor the point. I just wanted to mention that delay that was caused originally by the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and some of our budgetary issues and concerns that project. This is one of the projects that were unfortunately shelved at that time. So there wasn't a lot of work done. And then in 2021, we were able to restart the project. And I just wanted to highlight that because we do feel that there was that lack of continuity from that December meeting to the BPAC project update in November of 21 did have an adverse impact to our momentum on this project. 2 years is a long time, especially the 2 years, these specific 2 years that a lot of folks went through quite a bit of hardship on many fronts. And then most recently, we had a planning commission meeting this past Tuesday, which we'll talk a little bit more about as far as some of the comments that came from there. A little bit more project overview. So the Poplar Street traffic calming and safety project includes traffic calming measures. We're looking at traffic circles as well as utilizing existing parking spaces and other methods, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail. We're also looking at bike ped connectivity improvements as well as safety improvements, looking at street repairs and maintaining our existing pavement section, as well as the drainage improvements along Poplar Street to capture some of the stormwater that is currently being surface flow through Poplar, as well as implementing our green infrastructure program. We do require some permits. There is a CDP, a coastal development permit required for this project, given it's a public works project in the coastal zone, as well as a tree removal permit for a few trees on the downtown side of the project near Main Street. There are 6 trees that are required for removal, given the line of sight and their location being right underneath some utility lines. Unfortunately, those are the ones that will be removed, and we have replacements as part of those, which I'll talk to in a little bit more detail. None of the cypress trees on the west side that are really iconic to the character of the street are being recommended for removal. Some minor pruning may be done as the project as part of the project, but nothing major and no removals on the west side. I talked a little bit about that. These are the 6 London trees that we were talking about. This would be to accommodate the sidewalk improvements and to ensure line of sight for folks at the intersections. And with the removal of those 30, we're looking at implementing approximately 30 new street trees along this corridor. This is the one, I would say, this is the one segment where we do have a kind of an open view of the cross section as you're coming through. And lining the street up with trees does also provide that traffic calming benefit that narrows the visibility of the view corridor for a driver. And so that'll be the trade-off there, is that we would be able to construct and plant 30 new ones. And again, no trees are being proposed to be removed on the west side of Highway 1. Here, I just want to talk a little bit about our project goals and benefits. So, this of course ties a lot to the funding and our grant application and program that we've been awarded. So why are we here? With this, as the city's bicycle and pedestrian master plan was commencing, many community members requested improvements in access for safety, especially along Poplar. Again, we talked a little bit about that. The senior center was a big proponent for this project, as well as a lot of parents with school-age kids. The Seacrest School comes to mind, but others as well that walk through this corridor. With the funding opportunity that we have before us, the 1.2 million of OBAC 2 funds, we wanted to supplement and leverage those with the deferred street agreements that we have. So that's part of what we're trying to do as part of our this project as well. And so again, this package will include the full context of the improvements, and we'll go through a little bit about the funding as well when we get to that point. But again, the main points of this ADA, we want to ensure that we have ADA compliant accessibility from Main Street to Poplar Beach for non-motorized users. We want to incorporate traffic calming measures. We have several that we'll go through in a little bit more detail as we get to that, as we get through this presentation. We're also looking to improve the quality of stormwater runoff through our green infrastructure implementation for this project. while maintaining the existing characteristics of Poplar Street. So going over the project overview, I just wanted to identify, so we looked at this project as, I would say 4 distinct segments of the project. We have the first segment here based on the types of improvements and build out that has occurred over the years through Poplar Street. We have the east side and west side where we have different characteristics, different street right-of-way widths. And so we are looking at the first segment. It's really the segment from Railroad Avenue to 3rd. This portion we are looking at, you can see this cross-section here. We're looking at, there's actually quite a bit of existing sidewalk on the north side. So we're looking at maintaining the existing sidewalk there as well as filling in the gaps in those areas. On the south side, we are proposing to go with a more natural, softer approach, which is a decomposed granite pathway. This would be a little bit wider to allow for more friendly usability for larger groups. And it gives that more of a soft feel to the project, which is something that the community overall said that they would like to see. We also are looking at the landscaped areas where we're utilizing those for bioretention and green infrastructure. So those are part of our project elements that we're designing, and we'll be looking at that. One of the key components I just wanted to mention. One of the key components I wanted to mention was also the accessibility to the private properties along Poplar Street. Where we have the existing and proposed concrete sidewalk, very straightforward. We would also install driveway approaches of concrete to match the existing and the proposed. On the south side, given that we have a decomposed granite path, the thought was that we were looking at actually doing the approaches in concrete so that as vehicles drive over them to access their properties, they don't create a lot of damage to the DG surface, creating low points and ruts, which would be impactful to accessibility as well as it could cause a localized minor flooding. And with that, we also are looking at implementing a class 3 bike lane along this, which is a sharing of the road with existing vehicles and maintaining the existing on-street parking that's on site. I want to mention.
If I could just stop you there, Moz, for a second.
Sure.
I want to emphasize what you just said, which is about the parking. Is that, remember, we are in the coastal zone. We are in an issue where the Coastal Commission is very adamant about us making sure that we do not lose coastal access and coastal parking. So this is very critical. So all of our work has been around not adding, but basically retaining what exists out there in terms of parking and dealing with concern about negative feedback from the Coastal Commission and the community about coastal access. So I just wanted to hit why that statement is an important one to deal with.
John, that's correct. And I also wanted to just highlight that this project, we were proposing to pave the parking areas as is typical for existing parking along improved streets in Half Moon Bay. Although that was one of the feedback that we received from the Planning Commission was that they did not like that portion of the pavement. And I just wanted to emphasize that this is not a street widening project. That was a comment that was received by staff, and I just wanted to reiterate that we are not widening the travel lanes in any particular location. The only areas that we were looking at additional asphalt were for the parking areas, and that was for longevity and long-term maintenance of the area. So just wanted to reiterate that. There is a very unique segment within this section of the project, and I just wanted to highlight that. It's between First and Second Avenue. We do have those two very large cypress trees that are slightly offset. It's a very iconic cross section as you drive through Poplar Street, and I wanted to make very clear that these were two of the most mature and beautiful trees that are out there, and our intention is not to remove these. And in this location, for these locations, we would actually look at doing a decomposed granite pathway on the north side for the purpose of protecting the root system from these cypress trees to ensure that they have to ensure that their health is maintained, and keeping the area around the trees as part of the landscaping and green infrastructure. As we get to closer to Highway 1, the characteristic of the street changes a little bit. There aren't any existing trees.
Hey, Moz, can you go backwards? Go back one slide. What I will say, if you look at those trees, part of our designs are driven by of trying to maintain a relative continuity in the pedestrian access and in the path of travels and everything. And these trees certainly, and retention of these trees make that difficult. So what I think what I would say is that it's very difficult to say, instead of having the parking, in part would be a problem because of Coastal Act. But beyond that point, you also have the issue of these trees would be right in the way of having bike lanes off to the side of the 12-foot travel lanes. And so you would have this point where you would break up these lanes and deal with that. So these are iconic, we want to preserve them and deal with it, but they have created a challenge in design. And I think it's an important piece to understand why we've had to kind of balance all of these desires and community wants and needs out of this deal. So that's all. I just wanted to, while you had it up, to point that out.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Yeah, and in a unique way, we're using it as traffic calming. Essentially, they're bulb outs. So in that regard, we kind of shifted to using this as that with that intended benefit. All right. So now with this segment, the small segment from 3rd Avenue to Highway 1, this particular area is a little bit different in that we do have we have existing concrete sidewalk on the south side. There aren't really any trees. I think there are some bushes and shrubs and landscaping, but no major trees in this particular location. And on the north side, we actually have a lot of the shoulders already paved with asphalt. So in this segment, we're looking at installing concrete sidewalks and driveway approaches. And then as we are with the remaining portions of it, we're looking at Class 3 bike lanes, sharrows with the vehicular traffic through this area. All right. The third segment we'll talk about that we kind of identified here is the intersection with Highway 1. It obviously has its own unique characteristics and scope of improvements. And we originally were looking at how we could best work this intersection and modify this intersection to improve connectivity for our project. However, during our design process, there were some conversations with Caltrans, and it came out that they're actually working on a major project for pedestrian bicycle access and safety. And the project itself is actually very large scale. They're looking at improvements from Wavecrest to Moss Beach. They've had some initial conversations with some stakeholders. They've invited some staff from the different agencies, as well as some members of the Mid-Coast Community Council and other folks that were involved in comments on the earlier Caltrans traffic safety project. And so after talking to them and going through our project as well as their scope, it was determined that Caltrans will actually be doing a large-scale renovation of this intersection as part of that project. And so we're going to work collaboratively together. Sorry, I butchered that one. We're going to work collaboratively together with Caltrans. We've shared our project plans with them. They're going to continue to share their project plans with us so that we can coordinate this work closely and utilize our program dollars for the areas of project for ourselves. Yes.
And Moss, I think Councilmember Penrose has a clarifying question here.
Yes, just a quick clarifying question. The Caltrans project, is that on the west side or the east side of the highway?
It's along the entire corridor, east and west side. So
East and west?
Yeah, they're not. It's not going to be a I doubt that we're going to have a continuous. I haven't seen the scope right now. They've been taking a lot of feedback from the community. So we've mentioned about the need for connectivity for east and west side for class ones. But they're going to be looking. I think they're going to be looking more specifically at the crossings of the intersection and improving the intersection equipment itself. So I'm thinking more like bulb outs and ADA ramps at the corners, the refuge islands in the middle, in the medians where folks that may be walking slower can have a safer place to pause and push another button. But we will also continue to push them for the overall connectivity along the corridor, both on the east and west side as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, that's in the very early stages of the project, but based on the schedule they've been doing, they've completed their survey work throughout the corridor. They were actually out here a few months ago, and we will be getting an environmental document for review in the coming months. So this is going to be coming up pretty quickly here, and it's a really great opportunity for the overall community. I will be doing an additional update to the council on this separately. So. Because obviously this was one major intersection, but they're looking at all of them. So we're going to have a lot of great opportunity to really advocate for the improvements of safety that we're looking for through Highway 1 corridor. So we're going to continue coordinating with them, and with that we can save the money and utilize those dollars on the local street section. We will be looking at some connectivity improvements in the interim. Possibly tweaking the signal with Caltrans representatives to ensure that bikes will get detected as they approach the intersection. But it'll be very similar in that it will be a share the road scenario for folks that are avid and for folks that are novice or recreational riders. For example, they would be able to dismount and utilize the crosswalk itself to get across Highway 1. So that'll be the temporary improvements while we wait for Caltrans to come in. And based on the schedule that they shared and our schedule, which we'll talk about a little bit, we anticipate that they would be coming on board right after, close to when we would be completing our project. Then we have the next segment, which is more of the commercial downtown feel to it. There is residential as well. But the segment from on the east side of Highway 1 to Main Street, we're looking at implementing concrete sidewalks on both sides. Again, establishing tree lines along the corridor, where especially on the south side of this segment of Poplar, there aren't a lot of existing trees. There are those 6 that are grouped close to the Main Street intersection. And our hope is that this project would remove those and then replant them with over 30 spread out throughout the corridor, which would give it more of a calming feel, and it really does close that tunnel vision that kind of gives you that frame of a driver as they're going through the corridor. One of the comments we did receive from Planning Commission and in writing, some community members voiced that they would like to see more traffic calming elements here. We do have the parking, which they do. When the parking is filled, it does provide that narrowing of the vision. We also will have markings on the pavement that do provide that kind of narrowing of the lanes. But some of the comments were that they wanted to see more than that. So we're looking at it. There's potential for a traffic circle at 4th Avenue or bulb outs in other areas. So we're going to continue. We've taken those comments and we're going to look at that and see what we can incorporate, and we'll have something a little bit more robust on the east side as well, based on the comments received. All right, here's where we were talking about as far as the traffic circles for the traffic calming. We're looking at utilizing the traffic circles along Poplar Street on the west side, and again, we'll look at 4th Street on the east at these intersections at 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. all of these are four-way stop controlled. So every vehicle that comes to it will be at a stop. There's no through movements without a stop control. We have pedestrian crosswalks proposed to delineate the areas and provide that safe marked location for those crossing points. We're also, the other benefit that we're looking at is to utilize the center of these traffic circles as some landscaping and beautification element, as well as implementing our additional green infrastructure and see if we can, again, improve the quality and reduce some of the volume of the runoff on the roadway itself, and improving the quality of the runoff by removing some of the sediment and contaminants that are contained there. All right, we've talked about the green infrastructure. So, some examples of the green infrastructure. There are some tree wells that could help with quality, although they don't always count toward our green infrastructure goals. They are a way of improving water quality. We have examples as well along near the library at the intersection of Piraeus and Purisima, as well as the incredible Petit building near on Main Street during a mid-block crossing. A little bit on maintenance side. So as far as the establishment period, generally we look at 1 to 2 years for establishing of street trees. That would be something the city would be overseeing and maintaining. As we move forward beyond the establishment period, we would look to partner with our local residents and commercial business property owners to jointly work together on maintaining the trees, street trees moving forward. The bioretention areas and traffic circles and the decomposed granite pathway we're proposing, those will all be elements of maintenance that would be required by the city staff. All right, so now I want to touch a little bit on the project funding. Again, we talked about our overall grant proceeds. We have 1.2 million programmed for the time being. We are at the tail end of the cycle for this OBAG 2 grant, and therefore there is a potential for losing the funds, which is why we're looking to implement this project and move this project forward as expeditiously as possible. There's no exact deadline. The way that these grant systems work, especially at the tail end, are that a lot of these programs are oversubscribed. And as we get to the tail end of it, if other projects are looking to fill funding gaps and are shovel ready and are farther along, there is a potential where we would lose our place and get kicked down the line. So if that happens, there could be a potential for running out of the OBAG 2 funding, and it doesn't roll over to the OBAG 3. We would have to resubmit an application and go through the process again. Some of the other options that we've been looking at are deferred street improvements. We have a number of deferred street improvement agreements. We have 23 of them, to be a little bit more specific, along the corridor of the project. That's out of 90 total properties, which I believe 10 of them are currently vacant. So there's that potential for some cost sharing as part of that, and that would be a prorated version, prorated cost per linear foot based on the improvements that are being proposed for the project. So that would be some, but again, that's not going to cover the funding gap that we have. There's also gas tax and Senate Bill 1 funds that could be available for components of the Complete Street project, as well as Measure M funds and other local source funds that we could tap into. So those are some of the options that are on the table. As far as the construction estimate, I have a little bit of a wide range here. With contingencies, we're looking at about 2.2 million to about $4.5 million. On the lower end, it would be more of a phased project approach. We would be looking at possibly establishing the ADA accessible connectivity from Main Street to Poplar Beach, maybe on one side of the street. So we could go forward with the north or south side, and also move forward with some of the sharrows, but maybe not do as much of the pavement repair as we would like to do. And some of the other elements. And on the high end, that would be more of the full project, doing improvements on both sides of the streets, taking the time to repair the existing pavement on site, This number is subject to change based on some of the comments we received from the Planning Commission on Tuesday. Again, looking at the full project scope, looking at incorporating additional green infrastructure, and looking at other softscape approaches to the shoulder area. That will have a little bit of an impact, and so we'll take a closer look at that as we update the project plans a little bit. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. If happy to answer any questions, and we can talk about next steps on the project.
So Mayor, and council member, we know that was a lot to take in, and we appreciate your patience at that deal. But again, there's a lot here and a lot of work that's been done. And as Moz said, we're happy to try to answer any questions you've got and go from there.
Councilmember Penrose, would you like to just go through at least the process of public comment, and then we'll have our questions? Because I don't think there'll be many. And you're on mute.
It's a clarifying question.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's start with that.
I'm just, the pedestrian paths that you're calling multi-use paths, are you talking about bicycles and pedestrians?
Correct. We're looking at potentially having, recreational riders on the DG pathway, strollers. It's the point is to have it for wider for larger groups, for families with young children and strollers. That was the intent of that. And then the more avid cyclists and even the more recreational cyclists. I think the class 3s are a great way to connect the corridor. And again, that's really, unfortunately, the constraint of the width of the street and where our existing trees and improvements are. That is a little bit of a limiting factor.
And maybe I'll answer it in a different way. It's basically no different than a sidewalk in essence, because the sidewalks get used by multi-users, basically the bicycles, recreational, the kids on bicycles, but pedestrians, strollers, all of those things. So these would be no different than that, except they would be basically a decomposed granite and a little wider than most of our sidewalks to accommodate folks basically going shoulder to shoulder.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, let's just open it up quickly for public.
I checked. I checked the list, and there are no public wishing to speak. So.
Okay. Well, I didn't officially open it, did I? So just to double check, anyone from the public would like to make a comment? Or okay, public comment is closed. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. So in terms of funding, we're short, after the grant, we would be short between 1 million and 3.3 million based on your current cost estimates. And then you talked about some of the alternative sources of funding. So, and if those don't have enough, we would have to go into general fund, correct?
That would be the obvious place. Let me.
Which is fine. It's fine. I just want to clarify.
No. Let me share some. Let me just share some good news. I guess is that we haven't been able to. We haven't yet come back to the council to officially let you know that SMCTA allocated MOS 3.2. What is it? How much additional money for Highway 1 North?
I believe it was about $3 million.
It was about $3 million, which is what we've been. And that's great news. They basically allocated that, which makes Highway 1 North very, very close to fully funded. And we thought we were going to have that shortfall. We have funds, the gas tax and SB1 funds available in our reserves, which are specifically limited to transportation related projects and things of that nature. So
that's fine. Remember
So I think that's the good news. We thought, and we've been holding those because we were concerned about allocations for, whether we get the allocations for Highway 1 North. So that's the good news. But it's obviously a policy decision. And that's part of the reason why we're here and why we plan to come back to the council soon to talk about it, because we really don't want to obviously drop any more money in this, frankly, if there is not the appetite to move forward with this and fund at least phase one of this project down the road.
And, I have a recommendation going forward. This is a great presentation. I like the detail on it. And I do have a few questions. Maybe at the front end, because, Poplar Beach and Poplar Street are major landmarks of this city. And Poplar Beach alone probably is as big as, if not bigger than, all the other combined state beaches, going to the end of our property line. So I think it's always useful to say, here's why, this is what we get out of Poplar Beach and, Poplar Street. This is its value to Half Moon Bay, to the whole community, for us, for our visitors, how, it's an iconic destination. And we are very dependent on our hotel tourist taxes. So just get folks, it doesn't hurt to say that at the beginning, because some people say, well, what do you mean you're going to defer street improvements? You're not going to do my potholes here. You're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. People's minds can easily go there. And we say, well, there is a lot of value to getting this right, which then brings in lots of revenue, a consistent source of revenue. So just to have people have that holistic strategic view doesn't hurt at the beginning, especially since each time, especially when you bring it up at council and people might be just tuning in for the first time to, what the heck we're talking about. Sometimes it's good just to have that opening strategic slide, maybe. Doesn't hurt.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? We kind of went at this assuming that YouTube understood what these deferred street improvement agreements constitute, and that was an assumption that we probably maybe shouldn't have made with it. And I'll ask it. Are both of you understanding what these generally do? Okay. Would you like me to?
Yeah, sure. I think for us and the public is always good. Great.
We had a tremendous number of subdivisions that were projects that, in areas that were subdivided and many years ago, and they weren't required to at the time to basically build the streets and do the infrastructure. Right. So over the years, we've had all of these lots that then are developed. Because of the haphazard nature of that, to some extent, you see in our neighborhoods where you have some have developed in front of their houses, curb gutter, sidewalk, for example, and others that haven't, or you have a complete, varying between, down between three lots, and you could have three different scenarios of improvements going on there. And in part because the community has been challenged to try to figure out what it wants to be, whether it wants sidewalks and whether it wants to be kind of that urban environment or whether it wants to be more of a rural community. Unfortunately, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, kind of stepped in and has made it more difficult for us to basically say, oh, we don't really want sidewalks and we want to be that kind of person. So over the years, the city developed a way to address this, which was when we didn't have a lot of improvements on a street. We allowed at the time of development someone to record an agreement that said really basically two things. One, they committed to making the improvements in front of their house when we asked for them to be made, which meant generally curb, gutter, sidewalk, everything that was related to the frontage of their street that you would deal with, and even some of the street if necessary to match that up. Or in the alternative, that they would agree to participate in the formation of a benefit assessment district. And each one of these were done at different. Some of them were done at different times, and the agreements are a little different than their nuance. But that's the two basic issues that when we asked them, they would do that. And so these improvements, realistically, are somewhere, depending on the location and whatever, are probably anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 worth of money in improvements out in front of their houses. with it. So when you look at this and you look at times 23, that's not a small amount of money that was there, and we're deferred, and we're not required to be billed at that time. And so that's what these are.
Okay.
And this is why they're important for this. I mentioned this because also on Belleville, for example, where we have a really disaster of a road, almost the entirety of that street was built with these deferred completion agreements. So as an example, and that's why we have suggested there a benefit assessment district to be looked at to bring these folks in and say, okay, we're going to give you a way to participate with this. So that's what these do. And that's what we're looking at here of 23 of these along of the 80, roughly 80, 90 lots there. 23 of them have these deferred agreements.
Great. No, I appreciate that. My second, and I just have two more questions. Second question is, if you recall it, opening up our last meeting, Don Horsley stopped by and we were talking about a few things, and somehow the topic of roundabouts, traffic circles came up. And he was tossing around some pretty high numbers, ranging, the lowest number he threw out was 5 million and the highest was 15 million.
Yeah.
I assume for some major different kinds of traffic circles over the hill. But I just thought maybe we can just provide a little more information, and in the future, how much our smaller traffic circles cost, involving very different kinds of, settings and implications and Caltrans stuff and, all that kind of stuff. Might not hurt, because that's different from a Highway 1 traffic circle, at Frenchman's Creek, right, sitting there on Highway 1. And I think that, it doesn't hurt to differentiate a little, maybe.
Thank you for that. I hadn't even thought about that connection. Thanks for making the connection on that deal. And yes, though we're talking about very different Highway 1 or, even coming off of the Highway 101 and doing traffic circles there, a very different cost point there with those. Yeah.
And hey, just the last question, and you've explained this a little bit in the past, but maybe just super quick summary. Some people will still say, hey, why don't we get some traffic cameras up there for a calming, and make a little income. And I know you've explained a little bit in the past why that is or isn't such a great idea, even though it sounds very tempting, just throw a few of those cameras up, scares the hell out of folks, big flashes, and that ought to stop it. So
Well, there aren't many of them around, and many were abandoned, and they're in terms of those traffic deals, and they work best at intersections where you're dealing with folks who are running red lights or blocking the lanes and doing those things. I'm not aware of any implementation in a neighborhood street like this in which those were put in. Now, one of the things that we have talked about at times is whether you put in the speed radar signs, and they have smaller versions of those that tell you to, how fast you're going and slow down. Those aren't precluded. What staff would tell you is that those neighbors probably don't like those things flashing. Somebody's going to have their house right, and that one of those right in front of their house. And they're not going to like in the middle of the night those things going off and shining into the windows and stuff. So those are issues that we deal with too, where you've got that context sensitive kind of deal. But so there's a difference between the cameras, which are also have an issue of kind of civil liberties, the license plates, and the council talked about those another time in terms of license plates, because that's what those do. They take pictures of the license plates and then they create a record of them.
Okay. So maybe if it comes up ever again as a possibility, just always put the word pilot in front of it, and that we might consider a pilot, and then gather some feedback from the community, how it worked and did it work, And
we do, and the sheriff, we work closely with the sheriff to locate our radar trailers out around in the community. We move them around. So we take advantage of trying to move them. We move them around by the schools when it's opening school to remind people that school just opened, and we move them. Sure. And they've been on Poplar many times, and they continue to circle through and cycle through. And they are helpful, I think, for people to realize And the only thing I'll say is, and I think I've said this before, most of the people that are speeding are residents and neighbors.
Yeah, trying to beat that traffic light at the end there and morning commute. And well, the good news is if you do a pilot, it's easy to measure the efficacy because, you put those little air hoses down, right? And it's pretty easy to gather the data.
It is.
Did it work or didn't it? So.
And we did, and Moz didn't mention it because we weren't trying to get into all the weeds, but we did traffic counts. And that also included those traffic counts basically because of the tubes and all this stuff. Also pick up basically the idea of speed on those, right, Moz? Yeah. So we do have some of that, and we did that in advance of doing the design on this project.
Great.
So
Okay.
we actually have some data that might be helpful to share.
It actually is available on our website, and I'm happy to share that again with you folks with the PowerPoint if you'd like.
No, that's great, and yeah, fantastic. So thank you. Very helpful, and I think this is useful for the community, and we'll send a copy of the decks to Councilmember Penrose and myself, and maybe just an email to the rest of the council. Hey, here's where to find this.
Deborah has her hand up.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Councilmember.
Yeah, I
Penrose.
have a couple of questions.
I think you were back on mute, Deborah.
The first question that I have has to do with the phasing of the project. And I'm wondering why, or if you have considered phasing the project so that one side of the street is done at a time. I know it may be more expensive to do it that way. On the other hand, if we're talking about the safety of our children getting to school and the safety of our seniors getting to the beach, then having a pavement on one side of the street going all the way from Main to the beach would be an ideal situation as far as I'm concerned.
Council member, you are a genius.
Oh,
that's
good.
That's exactly how our phasing plan is being looked at. With that is to basically do one side of this improvement and then come back and deal with it. So it's exactly what we're looking at for the very reason is that we get full disabled ADA access, and then we can come back and fix the other side when we have the money, if that's the way we have to go.
And we're talking about when we talk about phase one that you've got in there, is that one side of the street?
Yes.
Yeah, we would be looking at the south side improvements currently as of phase one. Correct.
All right, good. Thank you. The other question has to do with the various types of pathways that you have. I don't think I really understand when we're going from sidewalk to decomposed granite and back and forth. If you could show me on the map somehow what you're talking about, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we have, you can kind of tell here, I think this one might be a better one. So all right, so this is a good one. So on the north side, for example, we have a lot of existing.
Use your cursor so we can get it.
you can see it, right? Oops, sorry.
Yes.
Apologies. Don't click. On the north side, we have quite a bit of existing sidewalk, concrete sidewalk. So that was the thought process was to maintain that, and not waste what's existing out there. And so basically fill that in and make that connection with concrete, with a concrete path of travel.
How far would that go?
That one on this segment so the concrete on the north side as proposed would be from Railroad to Main Street.
All the way to Main Street?
All the way to Main Street.
Great, thank you.
On the south side, it would be DG on the west side, up to 3rd Avenue, and then from 3rd Avenue to Main Street, it would be concrete.
I'm sorry, say that again?
On the south side of Poplar Street?
Oh, Railroad, let's put it this way. From Railroad to 3rd would be decomposed granite pathway. From 3rd to Main Street would be concrete sidewalk again.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Another question that I had to do with where you change the amount of parking space at one point to 10 feet or 12 feet of parking. I forget which slide that was. Yes,
Right
10
there.
feet of parking. Why would you give more to parking than you would to sidewalk area?
That's a good point. We were trying to utilize the existing sidewalk through that corridor. So there's actually sidewalk on the south side that's existing. We were trying to reuse that. If we were to redo that segment, we could absolutely widen that out and reduce take up the extra couple of feet that is excessive for the parking.
Yeah, my feeling is that, the more we can give our pedestrian population, the better. And certainly to give it to parking makes no sense. So if it means destroying existing sidewalk and putting in granite, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
We can definitely consider that, but there is a cost factor to it because we're not.
And part of this issue is trying to bring this under a budget, so that and taking out existing concrete sidewalk is one, expensive, and two, a waste of resource and everything. So it's a balancing act on this.
Well, it would be nice to have some figures on that to know what you're talking about.
We can get you some numbers on that and deal with that. And
great, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what Jules thinks about that. We'll have to talk to him about that there.
Thank you, Councilmember Penrose, and I agree. Having the numbers, having the options sets us up for contingencies. If we get an extra grant, if some other money comes from another project that a grant fulfills, it's nice to always know what what each level of work will entail and cost. And
yep.
So good, perfect. All right. Great. Are we ready to move on to our second presentation on the Main Street Bridge update? Sound good?
We are.
Let's do it.
So I'll do a little, while Maz does this, I'll do a little introduction as well. And, in November was my 7-year anniversary with the city. And I came on just after the election in November, in which the initiative was had gone through, and the whole I would say sort of the hand wringing a bit in the community about the two initiatives and this bridge. And so I'm sensitive, very sensitive to it. My staff, I've tried to bring them up on history, and I think they're very sensitive to the issues. And we're really been trying over the last years to try to bring this forward and bring the community around and not have this a divisive issue at all. This is a challenging issue, made more challenging by Caltrans, frankly, and their construction requirements and new changes that they made to safety requirements. And it's just been, frankly, just an uphill run to this point. Obviously, trying to maintain also the integrity of the historic aesthetic of this bridge, functionality of it, while also trying to bring this around to something that will last for the next at least 75 more years from a seismic and from scouring and the issues on that creek. So this has been a real balancing act, a real challenge. And I can tell you, I'm as frustrated as anybody about how slow this has gone. But I will say this before we get into this deal, is that we, honestly, from staff perspective, we've done really nothing on this, but try to make this thing move along. And we are just caught in the headwinds of regulatory structure that makes this a challenge. And that we have to go through and check every box and kind of deal with it. And from that perspective, I wish we didn't have to, to go through that, but we are, and that's where we are. So with that, we thought it was important to bring you guys up to speed a little bit and status. We also hope to bring this back to the council February 1st or 2nd meeting. We're looking at, we've got a Main Street Bridge Advisory Committee we want to have, and we're hoping to then to schedule a council meeting update for all of this. We're also hoping for January, that our partners in this, Caltrans, will issue the environmental document and allow that to go out to the public. We've asked them, we've got all the materials to it, and we're hopeful that they will do so. So I think there's going to be some things to report in February positively in terms of where we are. So thank you for your indulgence, and we'll try to go through this as quickly as we can and not get into the nitty gritty detail, but I think there are elements of this that it's important detail, because I don't want to leave it unsaid. A member of the community has been talking to staff. I believe they've been talking to some of council members. And I think they're concerned about whether the current design and the path that we're going is the right path, and whether we should proceed with it, keep funding this and working with the federal funds, and two, whether we would need a vote of the people for this design. And we're not going to talk about the vote, but we can talk about the design and a little bit about what the resident has raised in the process of this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, like John said, we'll go through this one pretty quick. A lot of wonderful images from a lot of folks over the years. So our original construction of this bridge was back in the 1900. I just have to point out, I love this news clipping in that just the way that the project delivery has changed over the years. So in this case, this bridge was built, and then they were hoping that the San Mateo County supervisors would accept it. So very different process back then. So I had to point that out because
it's also splendid.
So
that's wording you don't see in the newspapers anymore.
So, yeah, I just want to point that out. So this is what the original structure looked like back early in its life. And then back between the 1920s and 1940s, we got the addition of these of the walls and the columns. That was something that was added on after that fact. And then between we also added the sidewalk on the west side in that same time frame. Then we get to sometime in the 70s, the east side sidewalk was installed, and I think this is 91. This was supposed to be 91. Sorry, and then I think this is supposed to be. I think this one was supposed to be on the other side. So sorry about that. I'll make that correction.
Reversed.
The 91, the other side was added.
Hey, and then Ross, can you stop for a second?
Sure.
Just point out how these walkways are attached there, since you have that picture up.
Oh, yes.
Another good picture.
So these walkways were added after the fact. So they're essentially supported by these rods that are connected to the structure itself, to the bridge structure itself. And so essentially they're cantilevered out with an extra support that's adding actually a little bit more weight and pressure to the sides of these wing walls and the structure, the arc structure itself.
Thank you.
That goes on both sides. Thanks, John. And then back in 2010, this was when a lot of the funds started for some folks. The original proposal was to do a pretty significant widening in relation to what was existing. There was some purpose for that. There could be the addition of bike lanes, although no additional vehicular lanes were proposed at that time. But there was a lot of conversation about that, and so that brings us to 2014 and Measure F, and the registration of this on the National Register of Historic Structures. So after that, we went forward with an Atticus and Nolan study, and there was quite a bit of information. There was a lot of testing done on on the bridge itself to try to figure out what is going on there. There's quite a bit of testing that was done, and there's a report that was accompanying that. I won't read these off in detail. They're written here if anybody, and I can share the full report. I believe it's also on our website. I won't read through all of them, but some of the recommended rehabilitation items I just wanted to highlight was, so obviously the spandrel walls and the arc ring There's some there were some improvements that were needed there. There were some big ones that were actually highlighted too that would add to the cost of this construction and the impacts. So specifically, we have they're proposing tie-back wing walls to tie back the wing walls using soil nails. So for folks that understand what that is, so you essentially drive posts into the soil that's adjacent to the edge of the bank in this case. And how far those go in, how they're reinforced into it, depending on this geology there, it's still up to, it would still be subject to design and review. We don't know that based on this study at this point. So that would be a big piece. And then there was also talking about the other piece that I wanted to highlight was the partial repair or partially replace cracked wing walls. That was something that was just kind of looked at. The wing walls have damage to them. And that's something that we are looking at and addressing as part of this project. And so even with the study that was highlighted as a need, and it didn't go into enough detail to know whether repair would be adequate or if it would have to be partially replaced and how much of that would be partially replaced. Would it be 90%, 50%? So there's still some unknowns with what was out of this study.
Maz, what's a wing wall?
The wing wall.
You got the picture. You got a picture in there, Maz?
I think I do. So you have the spandrel arch here. So that's not so beyond that you have kind of looks like a wing coming off of the bridge. So you have the area that kind of goes back into the embankments to hold the abutment back. So it's where it kind of flares out and goes up against the sides. A lot of it's actually hidden.
You see them. They're concrete against the stream bank that the bridge is basically locked into. It's the foundation system for the tie-in to the.
I should have I think there's a photo that comes up later on, so I'll highlight it when we get to that.
Hey Maz, if you go back to the recommendations, I wanted to just point out the one that's kind of minor thinking, with this deal. But number 7 is renovate the walkways, get them ADA accessible and make them work. And partially this issue, as they say, replace support brackets. Well, again, with that, but ADA compliance, again, it's kind of the theme of the night given with Poplar, is important for us because the courts have said that our walkways, streets, travel ways, all those things are part of the program for disabled access or accessibility. And this is one of those that has to come into that mix too. And that's something we're also looking at in this work.
Right. Thanks, John. Yeah, we have the wood planks right now. So the nails, as they become loose, those can become tripping hazards and issues. So our maintenance folks have to keep a close eye on some of those. And this was also identified as part of our ADA transition plan that was adopted, that was approved a couple of years back. Thank you, John. All right, so then we went forward with our project design. We looked at basically building a support structure to basically contain and keep the existing structure intact and keep the arches, which are considered the most significant historic portion of the bridge, intact and in place. The problem that we had was we could not really rehab it and add additional load to it without basically replacing it. So we are essentially utilizing that existing archway and supplementing it with additional support and piles, which we'll show. So this was one of the original aerial views and simulations that we did. Here's where it gets a little interesting. So part of the Caltrans requirements, they come in conflict with what the historical aspect of it in a way. We had to incorporate crash cushions as part of the safety barriers required for this project. So you see these are those crumple zones that you would see in other bridges. Essentially, if a vehicle would hit it.
for the member, remember that we came to the council and
Yeah, I remember these pictures.
with these issues and went through this thing.
Yeah.
So
I'll get through that. So yeah, that was a critical piece, obviously, that was in conflict with the historical aspect of it. Here's a rendering looking north. So based on the comments from the Main Street Bridge Advisory Committee, they really wanted to incorporate additional access and crossing. And so while at the same time providing speed calming and safety to pedestrians. And so we looked at, so if you look at the old one, had kind of the more basic ladder crosswalk. So what we proposed here was actually continuing the same material, the sidewalk through the crosswalk itself, having it elevated as a speed calming measure as well. So that's something that we incorporated based on that feedback. Here's a before and after picture of the looking east on the arch itself. You can see that the railing itself is slightly modified. This has to meet certain criteria, as we mentioned previously to the City Council, and also it reinforces the connection to the structure itself. You can see that we would be cleaning up the structure. We would grout areas that are cracked and clean it up, as well as provide stabilization on the toe of the bank itself to ensure that scouring erosion does not occur and protects the foundations of the bridge.
hey, Moz, point out, look at the brackets too. You might as well just, what's the difference? So the brackets versus non-brackets.
So we were talking about, I'm sorry, you're talking about the railings itself?
No, I'm talking about the cantilever are different, are handled differently. That's one of the best examples of how the cantilevered walkway issue is handled.
So essentially these walkways currently it's putting the load on the structure itself. This design takes the load off of the bridge itself and connects it on the embankments. So essentially, they would be separately supported without adding that additional load onto the bridge, which essentially keeps the original structure in better condition and not adding that additional load that has been a part of the cause of some of the damage to the bridge itself.
Thanks, Moz.
You got it. So we've been looking at some preliminary detour plans. So with this construction, the idea is that we would need to close one lane. It would be a phased approach. I have some phasing plans. I'll go through pretty quickly. I won't go through a lot of details, but we would be looking at doing inbound traffic, southbound traffic on Main Street from 92. And then we would have a detour in place before you get to Main Street Bridge for access to those businesses over there from the south. But we would be controlling it so that nobody would be going north from there on Main Street and be actually having folks to go back to Kelly and Highway 1, which would be a safer route. There would obviously be some impacts to traffic during that construction period, but this was the safest way to do it without actually closing the entire bridge structure down to traffic.
And let me jump there. We may not have entire agreement right now, but luckily we have time to talk about this. There's been the development, I don't know if you've run across them, the automated arms and the control points to allow basically two-way traffic to go in one lane areas and not to have people signal there with that flag people with that deal. And I think we still have to continue to look at that and see if we think that there's any way to do that safely and allow two-way, one-lane traffic through there. I know that the business community is going to be really, really pushing that. I agree with Moz that the one way in and out and dealing with that is the safest way. But I'm also looking at the realities and the political challenges that will come to all of us in terms of the realities of the businesses and stuff. So I just want to say we're still looking at that, and those are not written in stone.
So yeah, and then as far as the different stages, so we have these would be the piles, basically the foundations for those cantilevered structures, the sidewalks, the walkways. So that would be one of the first stages. And that would, based on the equipment and the staging, we have a lot of sensitive habitat. We have the creek, so there's not a lot of room to work on this project. And so we are trying to, limit how much equipment has to go into those sensitive areas and trying to utilize the area up here, while also, again, maintaining some traffic flow through. So then, it's kind of the same approach. I have a couple of different cross sections and I can go into details if you wish, but essentially we'd be working on certain segments, and then you can see we would be flipping it over to other areas, and we would still have, certain, staging for traffic. And I want to highlight that it's not just vehicular traffic. We would also have, we would also continue to maintain connectivity for pedestrian access. So I didn't mention that. I do want to make sure that we're not only looking at vehicles to cross during construction. We will also provide a narrower path of travel, but again, a path of travel for pedestrians as well. And then, so again, kind of flip-flopping and moving around and kind of doing different areas. So here we would be doing the same thing, where we'd be working in the median area. The vehicular traffic would stay, but then we would be swapping the pedestrian access pathway to the newly constructed section of the path on the east side. And then, this is the last piece where we would be putting in the barriers and having some temporary traffic again, while again maintaining pedestrian access. As far as our project schedule, I'm sorry, the formatting got a little jumbled up here. But we are essentially, as John mentioned, we are getting towards the end of the environmental review. We are hoping that the document will be going out in early 2022. And as we go through that process and get the final improvements, the final design elements and package ready for construction, we would be looking at going out for the final permits itself and construction, and going to the construction phase in early 2024. And our project would be, early in 2023, and looking at construction to commence soon afterwards. And if all goes to plan, it would be about 12 to 18 months from there. We're still looking at some of those details, and again, tweaking some of the staging to see how we can best speed that schedule up. So we'll, again, just like John mentioned earlier about some of the other temporary measures, none of this is set in stone quite yet. We're still going through that process with Caltrans. Then we come to the costs that we have so far to date. So our project for the design and environmental clearance, we had a $1.2 million budget. Of that 1.2 million, over 88% was grant funding through the Highway Bridge Program. And overall, we're looking at 13.7 million. That includes the design. And of that, the beauty of that is that we're looking at $12 million in overall grant funding for this project, which at the end of the day would be only $1.5 million approximately for local funds to supplement that federal and state grant. Now, with the opportunities with the new infrastructure bill, there might be opportunities to actually supplement some of our local funds with additional grant funding. So we'll continue to explore that as we go forward, and we do have the time to do that with the final design. So we'll look to see where else we can find some of that funds to supplement some of the local proceeds that we're.
I will say this, my understanding is that because we had to commit this money to move this forward, much if not all of this money has already been set aside and budgetarily with this deal. So this is not new money we have to come up with over time. This is money that is already in the bank and sitting there in a special fund basically devoted to this. So we've already put that there. So that I think is a very good news and a very financially prudent thing that we've done.
Definitely put that on the next time you do this slide. That money already exists in an account somewhere. It can only be supplemented more should we get additional grants and need additional things. But it's always good to mention anytime see a big number like that, people.
I will throw a little damp cloth on it, I guess, with that. I like the optimism, but normally those other grant funds and those grant dollars do not allow you to use those against to match monies for a federal fund, and the state funds can't be used.
Right.
So it's I just want to be, get real about it. Now they may change some of the rules as we move forward in the Build Back Better and whatever with that, but I want to be realistic that it's, maybe, but not likely that we're going to find more money. This is the best mix and split of a grant to local funds that you're ever going to find. And I don't think we'll ever see these again, frankly.
Great.
That was it for the presentation.
Okay.
Again, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
This time I have
Mayor, can I just say,
Yeah.
can I say a couple things to close before you go into questions? So staff is, I mean, and I was sort of being a little odd when I was saying a community member. I think everybody knows it's David Blovey. And so there's no secret to that, and he wouldn't make a secret of it either. Let me just say, what I understand from speaking to him and meeting with him and everything is that what his request, and I think it's important to understand what's going on. What his request is, in essence, is to say, I think we should bid out the Atkinson Nolan repairs, and we should make a decision on whether it makes sense for us financially to continue to basically match the monies for this federal project, or to go ahead with the Atkinson Nolan project. And Moz can certainly add a lot to this, but the bottom line for me is that the Atkinson Nolan came up with some numbers 7 years ago that were basically spaghetti on the wall, frankly, with that deal. I was there at the time. I've read the report, was there at the council meeting presentation, and it was a good report and a good analysis and testing, but their costing was there. Given COVID, given time, given 7 years, we're probably looking at least three times the cost of what they anticipated, which would put us at about $1.2 to $1.5 million for the Atkinson Nolan repairs, which would not get us to seismic protection, would not deal with the scour issues from the creek, and we would have basically a patchwork of repairs there that are basically Band-Aids, and we would not have a project that we had really any guarantee that would last, any time. I don't know what that would be. We certainly are not looking at a 50 or 75 year kind of lifespan for that repair project. So this is the crux of what the conversation that we're having with that deal. And frankly, we don't know how to bid. Moz kind of alluded to it right up front. We don't know how to bid a project that really wasn't a design. It was just a report that said, these are kind of the things that you can do. There was not a design associated with that. Even though they were civil engineers and they signed and did a wet seal on it, all they were signing was that they were civil engineers and this was the best information that they could put out. The second piece, and then I'll shut up happily for you, is that the concerns are that we basically eliminated the cantilever and the bracing for the walkways, and we're building separate deck bridges across there to take the loading off of there, and that is somehow historically changing the nature in the world and everything with that. I'll point out again, one of those is not historic, and he acknowledges that. The other one is. But frankly, his argument to dealing with that is that the brackets basically were pre-nuclear age and they don't have any nuclear isotopes, and those are historic in their own right. And while I appreciate that, and I love history and think that, we're not going to be able to reuse those brackets and the rods and stuff for that deal, and comfortably do that. They are not that way. We'd be happy to put them in the Historic Society's museum and provide those to them if they want them and deal with it. But that's where they belong, in a museum, not hanging on a bridge and supporting and protecting our residents from walking. So I just wanted to lay out sort of the arguments out there that David has posed. with that, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councilmember Penrose, do you have a clarifying question before I just procedurally ask if there's any public comment?
No, you can ask for public comment first.
Okay. Any public comment?
There is no one in the audience wishing to speak.
Okay. Public comment is now closed. Councilmember Penrose.
Yes, thank you. To talk a little bit about Caltrans' reaction to the Nolan Atkinson report. Would Caltrans be happy to just do what Nolan Atkinson recommended?
They would not allow that to occur. They would not.
Okay, that's question number one.
It would not meet any of their current safety standard requirements.
Right, that was my understanding. So it's almost a moot point.
And let me say, if I could, council member,
Yeah.
you sat on the council, and I'm not sure who else, but the city council made a call at the time when we accepted this grant funding that we did not want to go down the path of Atkinson Nolan, and
Right.
that was a strong policy decision, because
Right.
when we came to you, we gave you the option of choosing one or the other and directing us, and the council made a very strong policy.
No, I remember it well. Yes.
Yeah. And
I just wanted to clarify that for the public record.
Yeah. If I could say one other thing on the financial side, one of the real concerns we have with doing that is the fact is that we went to the Atkinson Nolan, Caltrans jumps out, and I am very concerned that they're going to ask for their money back, or a portion of their money back that they've spent and quote unquote wasted pursuing this other thing, because we just pull out the rug out from under them. And I think there will be a request for clawback of their 88% of the money that they've spent on this work, because you didn't have any intention of ever moving forward. So I think that's a real concern and issue. So we could be paying twice for that work.
Got it.
So that's a real concern for us.
Yeah. One other just minor question. The surface of the walkways, what are we talking about?
We're looking at stamped concrete. So something that looks similar to what we have, and so it would be formed stamped concrete, and it would look like the wood planks that are existing.
Compliant, and those are compliant with Americans with Disabilities Act. Yeah.
It's fake wood? Is that what you're talking about?
It's stamped textured concrete that's colored and looks like wood planks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've seen that on major boardwalk projects, and it sure lasts a longer time and doesn't get uneven and better resistance.
There's some in Marina, and I was just last weekend over walking there, and I'll take some pictures of it and send it to you, council member.
Yeah, that's great.
It looks really good, I have to say.
I have a couple quick questions. So 13.2 million is what it costs for a rehabilitation project, trying to keep some of the existing look structure. I'm just trying to remember, would a complete replacement of the bridge be about the same, considerably more expensive, considerably less expensive? It's curious.
I would say it'd be probably close to the same cost. There is some additional cost when it comes to rehabbing structures. It would be just off the top of my head, I would say it would be pretty close to what it would cost to do the rehab.
No. Good to know. Just want to clear that in my head, because I know at some points people are saying total replacement, screw aesthetics, let's just get something that could be there, for 100 years. But if it's about the same, nice to have something that could, also be aesthetic. Next question. So right now, we couldn't, based on your timeline there, it looked like, we wouldn't be able to start construction for probably another 2 years. I'm trying to get a sense, if we got hit with I don't know what the Loma Prieta earthquake was, on the seismic graph, but, a 6.0 earthquake. And with that, since there's no seismic reinforcement now existing on that bridge, would it pretty much be wrecked or what? We don't know.
Let me take it and then I'll turn it over to the structural engineer and everything with that deal. What I'll go back to the Atkinson-Nolan report, and basically the reason why the Atkinson-Nolan report always is kind of comes back is they said that thing is a tank. It's strong, it's there, and they don't see it moving with it. So that's what Atkinson-Nolan. If you look at what they concluded and what they've presented to the council. It's just this huge chunk of concrete, and they say it's not going anywhere. This is in a high liquefaction area, and frankly,
that was my next question. Is it bedrock or is it liquefaction? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If you look at like Loma Prieta earthquake, in Half Moon Bay, we had, I think, 2 buildings affected by the Loma Prieta earthquake. We didn't have, it just didn't affect us the way it did other places. If you look in Santa Cruz, you looked in other areas where liquefaction and the way it was moving and the seismic activity was going, they had huge damage. So the question is an impossible one to answer, because basically if we have a different version of Loma Prieta, it could go down.
Yeah.
And if we had the same Loma Prieta, it might or might not.
Yeah.
But you don't have any protection from the liquefaction for seismic purposes.
Right.
Anything to add, Miles?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, and the fact that the engineers reviewed it and deemed it that, for the most part, it's still safe. I mean, that's why we didn't move forward with an emergency or close it. If that's what was, found out in the study, we would have been taking a different approach.
Well, that's an important question. Yeah, it's an important question for me anyway, because
it's a very legitimate question.
You want something that's going to last 10 years. People say, "Oh, we're overdue for an earthquake," and without
weather,
insurance. Insurance, once described by a law professor to me as legal gambling, but we don't know. And what we do know is retrofitting increases our chances of preserving a significant proportion of a bridge versus having, to replace the whole thing by not doing what needs to be done. So,
and if I could, Mayor, I think you've just hit on one of the concerns and issues we have with the Atkinson-Nolan is that our lifeblood. One is people could be injured or killed if that failed and they were on it in an earthquake seismic event. And that would be unbelievably tragic, particularly because we could have done something about that. But our lifeblood is our downtown. And if we had, even if no one was on it and liquefaction and we had collapse and everything with that, because nothing the Atkinson-Nolan report would fix that and address that. Can you imagine what the impacts and implications to our downtown would be to deal with that? And that really, I think, is the 2 pieces of that. If we can basically make sure down the road that the public is protected when they're crossing that, walking, biking, driving, and 2, we can protect the interest and the asset we have in our downtown. That's why I think we're here and why the council made their decision they did several years ago to move forward with this.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing back the Bridge Advisory Group, and the quicker we get moving on something, will guarantee more of a solution.
Fair
and
enough.
Have to worry about these other issues. So great.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
That's
We're
all
good.
We got.
I think we're good.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no, this is very helpful, and it's important that we keep bringing up the conversations. And
I think it would be good for us after the first year to reschedule or to schedule an additional meeting. I think we would really like to talk about Highway 1 North.
Yes.
And also the parallel trails, the North parallel trails and stuff. So we'd like to add that and look at trying to schedule something in late January, maybe after the new year and all that stuff with the mobility subcommittee as well.
Great.
Yeah. Well, no, this was really good. And you definitely had me at no seismic improvements. And, if there's some other proof that, this is a tank and it's not going to move, I'd like to hear it. But that's kind of where this argument seems to land, what's real. So, I'm open to listening to alternative point of views, but I was glad to hear our staff report and your perspective. And since Caltrans, that does seem like, pretty much a case closed. I'd like to hear how we're supposed to get around that as well. So anyway, great. Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff. Good job. And thank you, Councilmember Penrose, for joining us this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Have a great night, folks.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care.